All right, King of the Sky. This is a great book, but I'll tell you up front, it takes a long time to make the big point, okay? So you gotta stick with it because it's a really great point, okay? It's by Nicola Davies and illustrated by Laura Carlin. All right, so stick with it. It's good. It rained and rained and rained. Little houses huddled on the humpbacked hills, chimneys smoked and metal towers clanked. The streets smelled of mutton soup and coal dust, and no one spoke my language. So if no one spoke his language, it might be an unfamiliar place. All of it told me, this is not where you belong. Closed down. Just one thing reminded me of home, of sunlight, fountains, and the vanilla smell of ice cream in my Nona's gelateria. That's where they make gelato. It was Mr. Evans' pigeons in their loft behind my house, cooing as if they strutted in St. Peter's Square in Rome. So now we're talking about Europe. St. Peter's Square in Rome, kind of encircled in Rome. So St. Peter's Square is at the Vatican City. It's its own country, but it's surrounded by the city of Rome, which is in the country of Italy. So clearly, this kid is now in a new place with people who don't speak the same language as him, but there are some things that remind him of Rome, where his Nona's from. And when I hear the word Nona, I know he's probably from Italy, but not in Italy now. And this is kind of what St. Peter's Square looks like. This obelisk is there, and this is the Basilica of St. Peter's. It's where the Pope is. Mr. Evans' face was crumpled, and he could hardly walk, but when his birds flew, he smiled like springtime. I stood beside him and watched, as his pigeons soared above the chimneys and the towers, up to where the sky stretched all the way to Italy. It's a great picture. Love the illustration style. A lifetime of working in a coal mine had taken Mr. Evans' breath away, so he spoke soft and slow enough for me to understand. I like to see them fly, he whispered, after so long underground. So what he enjoys seeing, because he worked so long underground in the coal mines, is he loves to see birds fly. Every day I came to see the pigeons. I'm training them to race, Mr. Evans said, and this one's going to be a champion. He put a pigeon in my hands. I felt its small heart racing underneath my finger and the push and power of its wings. Its head was whiter than a splash of milk. Its eye blazed fire. Name him and he's yours, the old man said. I don't have to think. Re di cielo, I replied, King of the Sky. The bird's name is King of the Sky. Mr. Evans showed me how to catch the birds and slip them into a basket. Then we'd wheel the basket to the station in a barrow. How far away then, Mr. Evans? The station master would ask. My friend would name a station up the line, 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles away, a little further every time. They don't need a map like we do, Mr. Evans told me. They're born knowing how to find their way. All they need is a bit of practice. So each day he takes the birds a bit further away from home to have them practice finding their way back. Back at the loft, we'd wait, eating Mr. Evans' Welsh cakes and squinting up to the light. "Look out now," Mr. Evans would say. "Keep those young eyes of yours well peeled." It never took them long. From places far away, places they'd never been, the pigeons flew home straight and fast as arrows. But the pigeon with the milk-white head was always last. Still, Mr. Evans said he'd be a winner. "He's a hero," the old man wheezed, "like the pigeons in the war, carrying messages even when they were shot. Just you wait and see." So he's referring to carrier pigeons who used to send messages between where soldiers were fighting and headquarters or a base or something like that. Every day Mr. Evans grew a little weaker. By racing season he couldn't leave his bed, so I put the racing rings on the pigeons' legs and I took them to the station. I scoured the sky for their return and checked them in. Mr. Evans' bedroom wall was papered with their winnings, but not one for Re del Cielo, my king of the sky. "He's got the wings for distance," Mr. Evans breathed. Here's the race he's waited for." He handed me the entry form. King of the Sky would go to Rome by train, then race back 1,000 miles and more. So now we know this kid is from Rome, and Rome is more than 1,000 miles away from where he lives now. And if it's accessible by train, that must mean it's somewhere else in Europe. Most likely. It'd be very odd that it'd be anywhere else. I smoothed his feathers, looked into his eye, and put him into the basket for the journey. A part of me was going with him. I wasn't sure it would come back. So a part of this kid is going with the bird on the journey. He's not sure it's going to come back. Wonder what this whole story means. The race day dawned. A storm blew in. All 3 books we've read so far this week, there's a storm. Here are the birds, and I know gelateria. That must mean they're in Rome. Ooh, if you ever can have gelato, it's great. It's like ice cream, but a little bit, the consistency is just a little bit different. Love it. Lightning, wind, and rain. There's the pigeon. Remember, has a head as white as milk. I waited for 2 whole days and nights, but the pigeon with the milk-white head did not return. I have a hunch I know where he's at. We're talking ships, but you can get somewhere by train. It's still in Europe. I'm thinking we're talking about somewhere in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and the Welsh cakes. It's probably near around, if I were to give a city as a reference, got to be near London somehow. Train using the Channel. I don't know if that's 1,400 miles though, but I'll find out. I sat beside my friend's bed, and I told him that perhaps the sunlight and the fountains and the vanilla smell of ice cream from 1,000 gelateries had made our pigeon want to stay. Would the sunlight and the fountains and the vanilla smell of ice cream really make the pigeon want to stay? Who are those the familiar things for? Maybe it's the boy. No, said Mr. Evans. That will only tell him this is not where you belong. The old man's eyes blazed fire. Get out there, boy, he said, and welcome him. The rain had stopped. I ran out to the loft and squinted up to the clouds. A speck, a blob, a bird, a pigeon with a milk-white head, a hero, and a champion. "1,200 miles he'd flown, from somewhere far away he'd never been, steered north and west, finding his direction from the sun." Yeah, he's in the United Kingdom. "And the force that guides a compass needle, flown until he saw the shape of humpback hills, the lines of little houses in the chimneys, heard the clanking towers, and smelled the soup and coal dust." Flown down into the arms of the smiling, crying boy, the boy who knew at last that he was home. So this whole bit of training that pigeon, go a little bit further, come back, a little bit further, come back, go to your old home and come back, was all about building the familiarity of the new place he lived and finding a purpose, finding potential, and making something useful out of it. Potential in the branch, potential in training the birds, potential in making a park out of something that was trash. These three books turned out eerily similar. Hope you loved it. I did.